Right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. The noonday gun has just gone off in our Cape Town studio where we're based. Signals the start of our weekly webinar. My name is Neil Peterson. I'm the founder and content-in-chief of Real Estate Investor, South Africa's leading independent real estate content and education platform for more than 16 years. And we're really passionate about serving the South African real estate investor, industry, business community through our digital platform, rei.co.za, monthly magazine, Real Estate Investor, and our weekly webinars and regular live in-person events. So welcome to our regular investment webinar brought to you by Real Estate Investor. I'm delighted to be your host, and along with our three special guests today who I'll introduce to you all very shortly. So our topic for today is navigating the nuances of the South Africa's current residential rental market, which I'm sure is going to be a great discussion. So before we dive into the heart of today's discussion, let's cover some important housekeeping details, particularly regarding webinar recording. So there's great news for all of our registered attendees. A recording of today's webinar will be meticulously crafted and made available to you. So expect the recording to hit your inbox within the next couple of days. So for our esteemed REI newsletter subscribers, your exclusive access awaits you tomorrow morning through a convenient newsletter replay link. Alternatively, for swift and seamless access, you can head to the rei.co.za website, navigate to the education tab, click on event replays, and there you have it, your webinar choice ready for viewing at your leisure. So we understand the value of flexibility, and we want to ensure that you can revisit this valuable content whenever it suits you. So we've got you covered. So first of all, attendees, your active participation is welcome, but also highly encouraged. It is an interactive session. It's more than just a presentation. So your questions play a crucial role in shaping this. So if you have any queries or thoughts you'd like to share with our esteemed panelists, don't hesitate to engage with us. To submit your questions, you just utilize the Q&A box conveniently located at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. The chat box is reserved for general comments. So let's keep the conversation flowing. So we'll address the questions during the course of the webinar in our panel discussion in the final session. So fire away with your inquiries. So without further ado, we're going to dive into the heart of today's insightful content. As I said, we're navigating the nuances of South Africa's current residential rental market. We're going to unpack some of the dynamics of what's happening in the South African property market and the rental landscape. And we'll analyze and discuss, the star performing provinces, alongside also the challenges that we are facing. And we'll get insights to what we can learn from these trends, and also practical advice from our experts here today on addressing challenges and capitalizing on opportunities in effective property management. So it promises to be another valuable session for you all, for our professionals, our investors, and anyone interested in the intricacies of the market today. So, ladies and gents, it's a great pleasure. I present you our esteemed panelists. First up, let me introduce you to Michelle Dickens. Michelle has a well-earned reputation in prop tech, first as co-founder of TPN and now as CEO of PayProp South Africa. Michelle, we're really thrilled to have you with us today. Would you like to take a moment to greet our audience and perhaps briefly share a little bit about yourself and also PayProp? Oh, you're on mute there, Michelle.
I've got unmuted myself. Thank you, Neil.
No.
Always a pleasure to come and participate and be part of the real estate market. I've been with PayProp now, believe it or not, for a year. I sit as CEO of the South African business. As many of our audience probably know, we are in the UK, the US, and Canada as well. But we are nearly 20 years in the market in South Africa. In December, it'll be 20 years since we ran our first processing on the PayProp platform. PayProp is a property management system sitting in the banking rails. So what separates us and makes us unique in the market is that we are actually transacting on the bank account. And that way we have full sight of every rand and cent that the estate agent has. And we secure it. The safety of the client funds is our primary objective, ensuring its flow of funds safely from the tenant to the landlords, with all the property expenses paid and dispersed along the way. And that is PayProp.
Wonderful. Great having you on board today, Michelle. Our second guest, Grant Smee. He's CEO of Only Realty Group. They're part of a group that own also a piece of Lead Home, Adrian Edge Properties, amongst others. He also brings a wealth of knowledge to our discussion today on the rental market sector. Grant, we're delighted to have you back. Could you give us a bit of a glimpse into your background and also Only Realty?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I think you mentioned so Only Realty Holdings is the holding company to Only Realty itself, Only Realty Property Group, which is predominantly a property management business, to Lead Home, which is the noisy disruptor and younger brother to disruption in the property industry, and then Frankie Bells and Adrian Hirsch, which are two very established brands out in Joburg, focused on the luxury rental and sales market. But our group manages around 5,000 properties nationally, with footprint in KZN, Joburg, Gauteng, and Western Cape. So we get a good picture of what the market's doing across sales and rentals.
Awesome. Great stuff. Great having you on, Grant. And then lastly, our third guest, it's David Beattie. He's passionate about adding value to owners' property ownership experience, and he believes that professional property management plays a pivotal role in the success of property investment. So he has over 25 years experience in marketing, sales, key account management operations, and been operating in the field for over 15 years. He's also a director on the board of the Western Cape branch of Institute of Estate Agents, and he's also the publisher and author of the property book, The Expert Landlord. So David, welcome. Nice to have you. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Great. Thanks, Neil. Great to be back with you. And so, yeah, we manage, as Chorus Property Group, we manage about 1,000 leases across Joburg and Cape Town. A lot of our leases are in the affordable housing sector. In fact, we're shortly taking on 1,000 units in a social housing project in Cape Town. And then I am also a board member of the East City Housing in Pretoria, so I get a really good feeling of what's going on in those various cities. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here, David, as well. I think we look forward to you sharing your insights as well from all those experiences on all those different panels. So first of all, we're going to kick off. So Michelle, it's an extremely dynamic space at the moment, the rental market, with good and bad. And you certainly at the forefront of certainly what's happening in the rental sector. I mean, if we want to speak to anybody what's happening, I think you're the right person. And also you understand the dynamics of what's actually happening in the economy, but more importantly, in those rental markets. And I also know that you published your latest PayProp rental index as well. And I think it makes sense that you maybe just set the whole scene for us, because I know you've got a little bit of an intro that we can go into. So over to you, Michelle. Michelle, don't forget to unmute yourself. Oh, there we go. Great.
Right. So what I thought I'd do is just share some data that that we're seeing about the rental market at the moment. So this is our Q3 data that we've prepared. And as a starting point, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the inflation rate. And, you know, as we know, the inflation rate is one of the drivers that drives the interest rate. We're very pleased to see that the interest rates have at least stopped have stopped growing. They're flat. And I guess we're all waiting in anticipation for when we start to see interest rates coming back down. But it is driven a lot by the inflation rate. When we talk about the inflation rate, though, from a rental perspective, it's interesting because it has an impact on the profitability of a landlord. And the profitability of a landlord has an impact on the estate agent, because when landlords are feeling squeezed, they're going to go and squeeze their estate agents. And this is often when landlords feel that they can go to loan and run their own portfolios themselves. So inflation, profitability is going to impact your audience today. We've got both landlords in the room and we've got real estate agents in the room. What we can see is inflation's coming down. That's the red line. Very pleasing to see how it's come down into the middle part of 2023. And where it was in the 7% territory, we're now down to 4.7, 4.8, and it's just starting to rise again. More importantly, though, is we've seen this coming together between the inflation rate at the high end and the national average rental growth, which is that blue line, which during the COVID pandemic period went negative. So landlords were actually experiencing negative rental growth in their portfolio. Inflation is still really, really high, and so the expenses on the property are high, but the rental growth isn't meeting those expense growth, and that is when landlords start to feel the pinch and really, really, really feel that their profit is coming under pressure. So earlier this year, we saw those two lines coming together, meaning that rental escalation and inflation were quite similar, and landlords might have been feeling a little less under pressure in terms of the property expenses. However, we still have high interest rates, and those high interest rates are still driving higher mortgage repayments. And so not all landlords who were mortgaged will be feeling that lessening of the pressure. What's good to see, though, is that the rental escalation continues to go up. So we're at 4.9% at the moment, nationally overall. And so landlords are starting to recover funds in terms of rental escalations. And I'm going to talk a little bit about profitability in a moment and talk a little bit about cost recoveries, Neil, because your profitability doesn't always necessarily have to be driven purely by revenue. It can also be driven by cost recoveries as well. So this is just the quarterly look at the rental escalation, and we can see that that number for Q3 2023 is up to 4.6, but on a month-on-month, the latest number is 4.9. So it's good to see the escalation going up on a month-on-month basis. The latest month we're sitting at 4.9, and that's an annual rental escalation growth. So how are our tenants paying their overall budget? What does that overall budget look like? Because how the tenant feels and how the tenant spends his income will determine what's left in the pot for him to pay on his rental. And it'll also start to feed into the risk buckets of the different tenants. And of course, landlords are looking for the minimum risk tenants. Estate agents are looking to place those minimum risk tenants. So how are tenants paying their rent at the moment, or how are they paying their budget overall at the moment? Well, 44% of what they earn is being paid just to service their debt. So simply because you're a tenant doesn't mean that you don't have other debt, doesn't mean that the interest rate doesn't impact you. Yes, the interest rate is still going to impact tenants in terms of car repayments, credit card repayments, personal loans, other type of debt that they might have. And so 44.5% of their income is spent on servicing their debt. 28.8% is spent on the rent. And yes, different tenants in different categories will service more or less of their budget on rent. The higher up you go in your income, the less you're servicing on rent. The lower down you go in the income bands, the more that you are contributing towards your rent. But on average, 28.8% of tenants' income is spent on servicing their rent, which leaves them with only 26.7% to spend on things like transport, fuel costs, school costs, groceries, your normal living expenses. What this means from a risk category is that dark blue circle, 38.5% of tenants are in the minimum risk. And these are the tenants that we want to pay. So 1 in 3, just over 1 in 3 tenants that are being profiled are sitting in this minimum risk tenant. And this is what everyone is fighting for. The problem is that as the interest rates have gone up, the minimum risk category has shrunk. So we were at 44%, we're now at 38%. It just means that less tenants are sitting in that risk category. What are our agents looking for? Well, our agents are looking for profitability, number 4. And how do they want to achieve profitability? They want to grow their portfolios. So agencies at the moment are saying our main focuses and concerns for this 2023 period, we wanted portfolio growth. We wanted to find quality tenants, manage the arrears, and we were looking for profitability out of that. So let's talk a little bit about how we can drive income into our business, not just through, as an estate agent, just not through commission, But also, what other fees are being charged? These are fees that landlords can also charge. So we've got our initial lease or admin fee. 95.5% of the market says, yes, I charge for that. I charge an upfront fee to find a tenant, to the tenant, in terms of drafting the lease agreement. 57.8% of the market says we charge our landlord a procurement fee. This is interesting to me. Monthly admin fees that are charged to tenants for services, monthly admin fee charged to tenants for services like technology services. Incoming inspections and outgoing inspections. 26% of the market says, yes, we charge an incoming inspection. And 31% of the market says, well, we charge an outgoing inspection. So these are cost recoveries that we're looking at. When we look at that initial lease fee, a cost recovery, the majority of estate agents and landlords can charge between 750 and 1,250. That's nearly 60% of the market. That's the range that they are charging the tenant in order to draft and draw up the lease agreement. In terms of commission charged, the majority of estate agents are charging 10% for their services, but we do have agents charging less than 8% and charging more than 10%. Neil, it's very much driven on what are the services that are being charged. Some agents provide a more premium service, and some agents are just doing collections. So it's very much dependent on what the services are that are being provided, but this gives us a good range. The procurement fee, the majority of estate agents who charge a finder's fee for finding the tenant, 62.3% say we charge a commission based on a percentage of the rent. That percentage turns out to be pretty close to 1 month's rent. So we've got 15% of the market saying we charge 1 month's rent, and 62% of the market saying we charge an interest rate, which is more or less on average equivalent to 1 month's rent. So this is really what's going in the market at the moment. The monthly admin fee charged to the tenant for me is an important change in the market. And this is where estate agents are saying, well, we are providing our tenants with technology, with stuff that enables them to log maintenance 24 hours a day on a maintenance system, for example, which gives them full sight of the interest that's being earned on their deposit that's being held. And for that, we charge an admin fee to the tenant. The average at the moment seems to be around about 100 Rand. But you can see that 35% of the market is saying, well, we're charging less than 100 Rand, 23% of the market saying we charge between 100 and 120. And we've seen some areas 180, 150. So this is a number. Of course, it needs to be in the lease agreement. So any charge that is charged to the tenant needs to be recorded in the lease agreement so that the tenant is aware upfront. Incoming and outgoing inspection fees are definitely becoming more of a reality. It's a legislative requirement. So the tenant and the landlord must perform a joint incoming and joint outgoing inspection. Often this service is the responsibility of the agent on the behalf of the landlord. And so the agent is charging the tenant an incoming inspection and again an outgoing inspection at the end of the lease. The average cost there, Neil, is 458 Rand. It's 453 Rand for an incoming on average and 458 for an outgoing on average. This just gives our audience a sense of what's going on in the market, what are my peers doing? Because of course, if you want to charge these fees, you have to put them in your lease agreement first. So these are things that if are not already incorporated in our audience's lease agreements, now's the time to start implementing it, and then you can start charging those fees from that point going on. So a little bit about the market and a little bit about how our agents can and our landlords can help with some cost recoveries in a tight market where we understand that profitability is under pressure.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for setting that scene so nicely there, Michelle. Grant, what are you seeing from your perspective? And then let's dig a little bit into the market. I mean, what Michelle has obviously, set the scene just in terms of, typical costs and risk and that kind of stuff. I mean, we've seen certainly that property sales are down. All the stats show mortgage applications it's declined, I think, by 18%, I think was FNB's figure. which means that the rental market has gone up. Typically, everybody will say a boom, but I think where Michelle described it, obviously, we got a high inflationary environment. We got consumer, as Siplamanda from FNB economist said that, you know, it's actually a living crisis that people are in. So maybe, what are you seeing from your experience out there in the rental? You've got 5,000 properties. What's happened?
Yeah. So look, I mean, I think one thing that Michelle mentioned is there's certainly demand is up. There's a lot more people looking to rent. Our rental figures are up exponentially compared year on year. We had a great 2021, 2022 in sales, but rentals has definitely stepped to the forefront in the last sort of probably 6 to 8 months. And then we're also certainly seeing rental levels that haven't been achieved in a long time being achieved by landlords. We do see competitors in the market. I have concerns around some of big developers and their stock and the stock they're making available. They're going to have to put that into the rental market. So it might cause some pressure in terms of supply and pricing. But broadly speaking, I mean, Western Cape, we think about it, the darling of the rental market really at the moment. Massive demand. Rentals are enormous. And people are paying an absolute premium for properties here. It's almost back to the panic renting of sort of 5 years ago, where they were accused of people trying to rent any property. They would rent anything. But then in Gauteng, again, I know there's a lot of negativity around the market and Gauteng itself, but there's certainly transactions happening on both the sales and the rental side. So I think although the market's not as buoyant as it was, we can't try and pretend it's going to be back to 2021 levels on the sales side. We're still seeing transactions happen. People are still buying. They're buying well-priced properties because rentals are that much more, and landlords are trying to recover costs. Especially those landlords that bought properties in the low interest rate environment. They really are now burning, and they're trying to recover that through rental. A lot of tenants are seeing value in buying their own properties. But then there's, again, the cost of ownership, levies, rates and taxes all coming through the mix. So it's not all doom and gloom, I think, from our side. I'm excited for our teams and what they're doing, what they're producing, but it is not the easiest market to be in at the moment.
Right. Thanks for setting that scene there, Grant. And we're going to delve a little bit more into a little bit later. I'm going to open the discussion to everybody, in terms of how it's really performing in terms of defaults and arrears and that kind of stuff. But let's not get too hectic on that right now. Let's first of all get David's view. David, what are you seeing? I mean, you're also managing big portfolios of properties, and you've written a book. In fact, you're the expert landlord. So you probably got some good advice as well for people as well. But I think just tell us, first of all, what are you seeing? I mean, you've got a national portfolio of properties that you're managing.
Look, I mean, before COVID came along, the rental market was suffering. We as rental agents were suffering. We were really lying on the ground, beat up, and then COVID came and kicked us in the face. So it wasn't a major, so COVID wasn't the pivotal moment for us and even landlords. It was well before then as well. And so to contrast that to now, is that almost since, it's difficult to say the point, but in the last 12 to 18 months, it's almost like the pressure's been released, and landlords are a little bit more relaxed nowadays than they were in the past. And I think a lot of it is because we're seeing those rental increases in the Western Cape, especially. Our rental Cape portfolio is running at 99.2% occupancy levels. In COVID, we're sitting at 11% vacancy, which is 89% occupancy. So landlords are definitely feeling less pressure, and there's more general demand. In Joburg, it's still the demand's not nearly as much there, but then again, we are still able to talk on rental increases. For the first time in about 5 or 6 years, we can actually start having the conversation around rental increases with tenants in Gauteng. The interest rate, I think, has made a big difference, and typically guys that were buying properties are now having to rent. We are still finding, though, struggling with finding quality tenants. So, for example, in a development, a project in Bellville in Cape Town, we would have 100 inquiries, 50 viewings, 20 applications, and one approval. So the general consumer out there is really suffering on their credit rating, and that is a challenge. We're doing a development in Benoni, and there again, a lot of interested tenants. Maybe the demand is not as high as we'd like, but still quite solid demand. but the average rental, we are struggling to approve tenants. And the conversation we're having in our team is, do we compromise a little on our screening criteria? And the message is definitely that we unfortunately cannot. We as landlords just have to work harder and rental agents to get more demand, so we can then get more inquiries and get more applications in, so we can get those precious few that Michelle mentioned about. So yeah, the other thing is just, there is wear and tear in properties, and there is a competitive environment, even in the Western Cape. We've got one landlord with a very, very large portfolio with us in a particular area, and they're not understanding why the occupancy levels are 60-70% and not our normal 1% or 99%. It's because they're not moving with the market, they're not modernizing their units, and there is still a competitive environment. Properties do get old, there's wear and tear, and I think the normal rules still apply, Neil. Have a quality product at a decent price and give good service to your tenants, and you'll be okay. And nowadays, you're going to be, in my view, especially in the Western Cape, but also to a certain extent in Joburg, you're going to be doing better now than you were a year or two ago. With slightly less stress, although the big thing is finding that quality tenant.
Okay, great. I think so. Yeah, thanks to all of you. It's a nice way to set the scene. Also, I encourage our audience here, if there's any questions, we will deal with them at the end part of the webinar. They've got a nice little chat box at the bottom there, and you can just submit your question. Robust discussion. So let's just talk a little bit about where are the areas that where there's, well, let's talk about defaults. Let's talk about, and you also spoke about cost recoveries as well, arrears and that kind of stuff. And what are agents and landlords doing? I mean, and we heard David say, well, look, we're not going too hectic, they're a bit more relaxed. And I think it probably depends where you are and that kind of stuff. There's less evictions and that kind of stuff. Idea was to get an eviction attorney on today, but unfortunately they weren't available at notice, but we would have got his views. But just let's talk about, because on one side, Michelle, we've got obviously agents that need to survive. So they've, they need to do that inspection fee. They need to do that initiation fee, which is, I think is fair in terms of, the service that they're offering, providing they're doing a great service. But at the same time, it's also, there's a collection that needs to be done. Now, there's defaults. Defaults, with sales obviously down, the market's in a tough area. Defaults are up, arrears are up. Where's that all happening, and kind of what can we do about it? What are the agents, or what do you suggest?
Well, actually, I have good news, because arrears are down, not up. So isn't that good news?
Wonderful.
That I can attribute to what David said was, do we kind of slip and slide on our criteria in terms of the quality of tenant that we take on? And the answer there is no. And so long, and I've always stood by this, so long as we placing quality tenants, we will have a better outcome and a better experience. Placing a quality tenant, though, comes hand in hand with a quality property, because you can't expect a tenant to pay their rent if you are not maintaining the property, if you are not looking after your tenant. So in PayPop's environment, what we've seen an improvement on defaults, and we've come down from 18.4% to 17.5%. So that's an improvement in the number of tenants that are delinquent. Also, if we look at the value of rent on average that's outstanding, it's 80% of a month's rent. And this is good, Neil. It's not over a month. It's not reaching into 2 months. It's 80%. I'm not saying 80% is good. I'm saying that we're still in current when we look at it like that. From an agent's or landlord's perspective, to manage that, you're always going to have risk. You're always going to have tenants that started off great, they were quality, and something happened, life changed, and something happened that they deteriorated. It's how we deal with it at the time and how quickly we deal with it. We know that we have legislation that's going to prevent us from demanding that the tenant vacates immediately. If it's a 12-month lease, we know CPA exists. We know that we've got to give 20 business days notice. And so it's about how quickly do we action it. The communication is key. And if the tenant has a maintenance issue, Let's not have maintenance issues that drive a tenant to say, well, I'm going to withhold rent until they are resolved. And this is also a balancing act because landlords themselves are feeling, as we've spoken about, profitability as a pension. So maintenance costs can be a surprise. So in our environment, what we do is we have a property account and we suggest, let's put in a buffer every month into the property account. It earns interest, and that little property buffer account will enable, when there is a maintenance issue, for it to be dealt with, and it's not a big cash flow problem for the landlord at that point in time. So it's a case of saying, hey, we understand the environment, it's difficult, let's create those little buffers. So there's practical steps that can be taken. Overall though, arrears is down, so I'm excited about that.
Wonderful. That's good. In fact, it concurs with yesterday. I had, as I mentioned, Siplamanda Kunazi. He's a senior economist at FNB. And one of the things he mentioned is that interest rates is probably the increases have come to an end now, and it goes line in line with all of those. And he reckons, and he made a prediction, and I'm not going to hold him to it, but it's about 6 to 8 months. He reckons that the banks are going to start opening the taps. This is the positive viewpoint. And we could actually be turning a corner. I mean, we've got an election coming up. We've got a whole lot of things, and people want to see change. It's now, we want service delivery because that's impacting everything that we do every single day. So coming to you, Grant, let's talk a little bit about the areas that are well performing, areas that are doing well, because the Western Cape at the moment is the darling of the sales sector. It's just the number, the vacancies are so low. I think it's less than 3%, the number that Siplamanda put up yesterday, but I think maybe you can share just from your perspective, where is it good, where is it bad, and Michelle, you can also have a chance to respond to that a little bit later.
Yes, we can disagree, Michelle, to make it interesting. So look, I mean, I think if we talk about the darling Western Cape, I mean, Southern Suburbs is always performing. It's got the amazing schools there. It's got a good rental demand there all the time, and that's not going to stop. And then if you look at Sunset West, creation of a lot of lifestyle estates and lifestyle spaces out there, so it's become much more of a destination. And then northern suburbs of Cape Town is, from an affordability point of view, and that immigration sort of market is definitely moving down there. And where I'm sitting today in Bloberg, it's just, it's been the last probably 5 years, it's just been an amazing space to be from a sales and a rental perspective, with demand going up, certainly on the rental side, as well as the short-term rental side. Airbnb sort of entrepreneurs coming out here in their droves. So again, West Cape is looking great. KZN North Coast is just, I think the only word I can describe technically is insane. It's absolutely flying. I think the placement of the airport all those years ago up on the North Coast was an amazing sort of advantage for not only Mhlanga, but actually more Ballito and that development up past Ballito up towards Richards Bay. And then in Gauteng, certainly Centurion as a space, Midrand has and always will be because of just location and affordability. And then you've got your outliers, and the East Rand and the West Rand for us are certainly performing very, very well. So again, and I think that speaks to affordability versus anything else at the moment.
Wonderful. And it's good to see that there is something turning. Certainly the Airbnb market in the Western Cape, it's probably one of the biggest in the world, and which is crazy, bigger than any market, and it's going like the clappers, and it seems to be certainly a market which investors can certainly jump on because it's all these short-term rents, as you mentioned. David, what do you see? Which areas? Where is it happening? Does it concur with what Grant is saying, and also with what Michelle is also saying in terms of defaults?
Yeah, I think. Look, I think Southern Suburbs. Actually, that's where I stay at the moment. I made sure, I'm renting actually a property that we manage as a business, and I made sure that I was first in the queue for that renewal because I knew to get a replacement property was going to be insane, and I was going to pay ridiculous money. So I concur. I think the issue, just as a slight pivot, looking at a different perspective, every market which has got a quality tenant, a quality unit, is going to have demand, right? Where the typical cities are, where the well-located towns and so forth. The key thing for me, and Michelle mentioned it, was the profitability. So your occupancy level in a well-managed property or a landlord as professional is going to be consistently good. The challenge is what rental amount they're getting for the costs of the levies and so forth. So I would suggest part of the goodness or the viability of a unit would be the costs surrounding it and what increases you're getting. So in the Western Cape, you're getting increases. In certain areas of Gauteng, you're getting your increases. And of course, the disadvantage of the areas that grant refers to is your capital cost is going through the roof. Whereas your capital cost in certain areas of Joburg is you're getting reduction in your value. And those areas might actually be good because your cost versus your income might be improving a little. So you know, I would suggest where the flock goes into the areas that Grant suggests, maybe that would be a good opportunity, but maybe there are still opportunities in not so popular areas or well-known areas or brand name areas.
Okay, great. So, Michelle, I mean, there's only so many, I think you put up the figure 38% minimum risk tenants and I think everybody's gunning for that. I mean, you know, Grant, David, everybody wants that minimum risk tenant. Now, isn't there a risk maybe on the other side? Because we've seen, and the stories come up regularly, mainly like the center of Joburg, and there's been other areas as well where we start to get sort of illegal tenants and, you know, sort of into buildings. Well, basically slum landlords, and isn't this creating that kind of market there? And how can we prevent it? More importantly, how can we take control of that? Because I think your organization certainly plays a role in that in many ways, and certainly from an agent perspective. And as I say, there's nuances in all these different areas. Grant also mentioned about the number of property developers that are now become rental agencies, and you know, there's a big one called House, which they're a big property developer, and I'm not scared, but because they are going through quite an exceptional boom in terms of rentals because they've spotted an opportunity. So how do we manage that? That between, on the one hand side, we're giving everybody the minimum risk tenant, on the other side, we're creating almost like an illegal sort of rental sector.
So that's quite a lot to talk about.
It is.
Let me position it like this. At PayProp, we do business with estate agents, property practitioners who are registered property practitioners, registered with the PPRA and registered with the Financial Intelligence Center. And we do this because we're regulated. We are integrated into the rails of the bank. And so we have a responsibility, as every estate agent has, to ensure that they are accountable to the Financial Intelligence Center, specifically around anti-money laundering and the movement of money. And estate agents themselves are vulnerable to this because we are a vulnerable industry, because we are targeted, because we have high volumes of cash or money, flow funds that move through our environment. From a rental perspective, we have high volume of money, and from a sales perspective, we have high value of funds that move. So we have to be conscious of that as a starting point. Then we want to talk about the developers, and we want to talk about the market. And the market is absolutely a market that, and our estate agents look after the predominantly micro landlords. So landlords that have 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 properties in their portfolio. That's the market that we service. We service about 120,000 tenants per month, 1.2 billion rand flowing through our environment on a monthly basis. Then, of course, we have developers that have felt the pinch of a weak sales market, and they have, as a result, the developments keep building because we have a housing shortage. So there is a requirement for housing in South Africa. We've got a growing population. We've got a growing population of people in the rental market as well. And so this market requires housing. It's the type of housing that we're building. And then if we're not able to get it into the owner-occupied market, we're putting it into the tenant-occupied market, which again is a growing market. So there is a need for this type of development. What that does do, which is what Grant alluded to, is that brings the prices down, or at least settles the prices in certain areas as 1,000 properties come into an area in one time with a lease up at that one point in time. It does dampen the market from a price escalation perspective. The reality is that this is more of a macro problem. High interest rates, high inflation, low income growth means that consumers in general are feeling a tighter pinch. And as there is a lack of quality housing, it drives tenants into a position where they take up less quality properties. And a less quality property, as I said, attracts a less quality tenant. It's a structural problem. It is a big problem. And there's certain areas that will feel that more than others. So your inner city type of housing is a different monster to your suburban type housing. And really the inner city operators understand the business that they're in. So as an investor, if the question is, well, as an investor, what is it should I be doing? Investors should invest in markets that they understand. The inner city is a different type of market to a suburban type of market. And the majority of South African investors who have buy-to-rent properties typically don't have more than 5 properties in their portfolio. And as they grow and diversify, the diversification doesn't have to be into the inner city. It could be into a different suburban area or into a different province. And that's where the real estate agent becomes important, because it's difficult to service a property in a different area from where you reside. And that's where the real estate agent offers a lot of value to look after your investment in your portfolio.
Excellent. So Grant, I just want to come back to you as well. With regards to the volumes, and we've seen in the Western Cape, and we've spoken about it being the darling, and David also mentioned the number of applications that are coming. So there's massive volumes coming in for one property. I know, just speaking to just agents individually, it's not uncommon in the Western Cape to deal with 20 to 50 applications. I think that was also the number that David was talking about. But at the same time, you've got to deal with 5,000 other properties that you've got to manage. And so is this not putting a huge strain on into how do you deal with it? How are we going to get through and make everybody and get that minimum risk tenant for the client through there? What are the dynamics of what's actually happening there?
Yeah, so I think the important part about running an estate agency is systems and process. We're not adding any value if we don't have sort of the checks and balances in place and have the systems in place to take care of a landlord's investment ultimately. I think to David's point earlier, look at different areas. The investor needs to decide on their strategy first, whether they're going to invest in inner city for cash flow, or they're going to invest in Clifton for capital gain. You've got to sort of decide what your strategy is around your property first and foremost. It's not a get rich quick scheme at all. It's not a lifestyle changing scheme unless you're going into big volumes. I mean, people who invest in property need to understand they're going into a risk environment. The focus on the minimum risk tenant is like insuring someone for a car that they don't actually own. So they're never going to crash it. They're never going to do anything. And I think what we've got to be realistic is we're in place as agents and as business to protect the landlord's downside. So we don't ignore tenants who are of slightly higher risk because of their credit profile only. But I think there's also this misunderstanding that credit profile is the only thing that defines high risk or not. And a lot of the insurances that come in place for rental insurance, for deposit insurance, for all those insurances will ask you for the credit check, but don't ask anything else. And I think there's so many elements to checking that a tenant is high risk or not. And the credit check is actually not the one indicator that, particularly over from the last 2-3 years, is the thing that we need to take primary focus. Yes, if they haven't paid their credit card in the last 3 months, certainly is a concern. But if they're high risk because something happened in 2021, we take a view on that and look at other elements that are more pertinent to the application. So I think the focus on the minimum, the low risk tenant, is avoiding, it's trying to avoid the risk at all. And really, our job as agents is to really be in place. When you drive a car, we wear the seatbelt, the airbag, and hopefully the traffic controller making the traffic moving smoothly. If that's a decent enough analogy. From in terms of our portfolio, I think to Michelle and David's point, is quality properties are vitally important. So we won't manage something that we don't feel where it's not being properly maintained, where it's not being properly looked after, or properly, or properly managed. And where a landlord comes in, and I understand some landlords have their opinions about things, but we literally do this every single day of our lives, and we understand how the market is. If you want to be the professional, join our business and make us better, or let us do our job effectively, because we are really good at it. And again, in the stats in terms of defaults, we're from a national perspective are always collecting better than the national default stats. Our portfolio nationally is up in the 90%. Our eviction rate is super low, and that's more or less not because we don't have guys that are probably need to be evicted, but because we've got a team of people who follow up and chase and actually communicate with the tenants on an ongoing basis enough so that eventually they're tired of getting the phone call and decide to move out rather than hearing the voices of people. And then in terms of agency, we've put in services in place that actually add value. So we've got a full-time legal person in our business, which wasn't something that we even considered 5 years ago. And now it's something that we see as essential, not even a value add anymore, to take care of our tenants and our landlord situation.
Excellent. No, it's great to see the systems are there and it's working. I think that's most important. And I would assume it's systems for you as well, David.
Yeah, I think there's something that we deal with landlords. Some landlords like to manage their own portfolios, and we respect that and support that. Some landlords are deal makers, and a deal maker is very different to the average for a professional rental agency. The rental agency is very much about process. We're not too much into deal making. It's not about the once-off. It's about every month, every year. In fact, I mean, on the first of the month this happens, second of the month that happens. It's like a metronome that happens, and a deal maker kind of person is going to get bored with that. So just check on your own qualifications and your own kind of bent before you decide whether you self-manage or not. Just on the risk perspective, what we are seeing recently is the issues with evictions. So we only really do evictions on properties that we inherit. We almost never, I don't think we've done an eviction on a property we've managed or tenant we've placed in the last 2 to 3 years. Well, because we are managing those guys, we are late pay, we're following up religiously and we're knocking on doors, etc. But we are finding that the courts are a little bit less reliable than they used to be. So please try and avoid eviction where you can. It is really, we've got about in the one portfolio 35 evictions happening, and it's really the poor landlord is just not getting the results. On the large portfolios in the inner city, I could write another book on that with the experiences we've had in the inner city. Please don't go to the inner city if you don't know what you're doing. Please don't go near the inner city. If you do know what you're going, go for it. If you do know what you're doing, go for it, because you will do it right. But the hijacking risk is a very high one, and you need to know what you're doing, and you've got to be careful. Our biggest thing that we're managing in our social housing project is that cancer that can come in, and once the cancer's in to spread, it's very difficult to change that. So the biggest risk, there isn't a greater element of criminality, and we do need to be aware of that. So on the large projects, be careful of your criminality, be very tough, have your processes very strong, and understand the nuances of what's going on in an environment. In the inner city, you have to be on the ground. So I'll just watch out for the criminality and the fact that the tenant, the last thing I want to say, on the large projects where there's large scale evictions, the courts are just not judging at the moment. So it is a real challenge for those landlords.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for that. So now I want to turn the corner a little bit, and I also want to reach out to our audience. I know we've got a couple of questions there that we'll deal with just now, because we are sort of coming closer to the end of the webinar, which we'll deal with. But let's talk a little bit about the future, Michelle. The positive thing, the stat, it's definitely showing in the numbers. The economy is turning, even though it's very slowly. We've seen interest rates on hold. We're also seeing the defaults are less. So you brought some good news. And my prediction is, and it's also from yesterday's, even from a sales prediction, that next year is definitely going to be visible improvement. So maybe just give us a sort of your crystal ball sort of going forward, where this is going to turn, where it could possibly go.
So Neil, I guess the one starting point is that employment levels are back to pre-COVID levels. For me, this is important. This drives income, and income drives consumer spending. So overall, employment levels back to pre-COVID. I mean, let's not beat around the bush and say that was a good starting point. It certainly wasn't, but at least there's improvement there. The second one is on the interest rates. And as we know, there's a lag between the movement in the interest rate and the improvement or deterioration in tenant behavior and tenant performance. So we're still working through those interest rate increases in terms of how the market has stabilized. When interest rates start to come down, it's still going to take time, 6 to 9 months from the date of the interest rates coming down, for us to see an improvement in performance, in a real improvement in performance. So I think what I'm saying is that we're still going to be in for a tough year next year. We're still going to have a market where inflation is high, interest rates will be flat, and hopefully they start to come down in the latter part of the year. We're still going to be in a market where profit is going to be squeezed, where we've got high escalations in terms of our municipal charges, our levy charges, our utility increases. And so really it's about how to manage your portfolio in that type of environment, how to get the most out of your property in that type of environment, and looking at whether you are in the right type of property. So am I invested in the right area, in the right region, in the right type of property? Is my property the type of property that's going to give me the best performance?
Grant, we haven't spoken about the municipalities and infrastructure, because yesterday was quite a big discussion with a property developer, and which impacts obviously rentals, and it impacts confidence, and impacts all these different things. We've got an election which is coming up next year, I think around May, and obviously, what is your prediction? Are we moving in that in the right direction, or how are you seeing the future panning out?
You want me to lie, or can I?
Say what? Yeah. Well, your view. So I'm asking for your view.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think it's going to be a big thing to try and turn around municipalities to sort of start looking after property and property infrastructure. I mean, I know there's a big drive in the Western Cape to try and get the infrastructure caught up to all the developments happening out here. But then there's obviously a lack of maintenance across the country in terms of general infrastructure and development, and then a big drive on collection of revenue from people that are paying. I think if you talk about defaults, I'd love to do a default level of rates and taxes out there, to really where the municipalities are falling short, where they can't reinvest. But yeah, I think it's certainly impacting people's affordability and their income, and it's definitely going to then feed into rental, but also into the investment market. Not only not only municipal rates, but levies are severely impacting people's ability to invest in property and rent them out, which again puts pressure on supply, and therefore, again, the guys that are in the market benefit from the upside of this increased demand on their properties. So yeah, so an overall impact across the board. Again, got to consider carefully when you're going into the investment markets, those costs that are often overlooked. When you see these ROI numbers, these guys put out, and they just ignore the actual cost of owning a property. It's infuriating sometimes.
Yeah, well, I was just at the results of a listed company in the residential sector, and in Johannesburg, and it seems quite common that they've got water issues. There's no water, and that was one of the complaints. And never mind electricity; that's a bonus. So when it does get on, so they've got some real challenges, and they're trying to control and take more control of this as they go along. Now, I don't want to end off on a bad note. I don't want to get us all I want us to leave on a high note over here. So, David, tell us, utility costs are going up. Landlords are paying more. It is affecting investors. It's affecting the whole market. It's affecting rental. It affects your pocket. As I say, there's Simple said there's a living crisis in terms of inflation. It's having a run-over effect. But how do you see it?
A year and a half ago, I was saying, what the hell am I doing in this market, in this industry? There's no hope. I'll go 2 steps forward and I'll go 5 steps back. So it was, but now I'm thinking, I'm okay being in this industry. I'm okay being in this market. It is flippin' tough, but it's not getting worse. In other words, everything is not going wrong. There are rent increases. There is tenant demand. So I'm actually quite happy. You have to be very professional. You have to watch your costs. Utilities is a big thing we haven't really covered today, but it is a massive factor you need to bear in mind. Utility supply and utilities costs. The whole municipal thing is a challenge. But I think landlords that are professional, that are knowing what they're doing, that are managing their costs, that are putting the increases in, and importantly, are engaged with their property portfolio, they're going to do it right. So I mean, I'm not trying to just bring positive out of nothing, but I'm genuinely okay with the market, not because it's 10 out of 10, it's because we're not going towards -20.
Okay. So now there's two questions I'm going to deal with, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity for all of you to wrap up and have your final say and give your final thoughts and sort of on a way forward. Got a question here from Bianca. In fact, we've got a couple, but are there any lease terms that you can include to avoid CPA, the Consumer Protection Act? For example, making it month to month. What lease terms can we consider to protect the landlord? Now, we don't have any attorneys in the house, but I don't know if anybody who wants to have a crack at it. Anybody? Nobody wants to pick up the hand. Somebody wants to talk on behalf of an attorney.
My first question is why do you want to avoid the CPA? Because the only thing about the CPA, and Grant could probably disagree with me or agree with me, is the fact of the 20-day notice period and an early termination period. So I'm not actually sure. I don't think it's a big enough factor. I'm not saying it's not a factor. There's much bigger risk to manage than worrying about the CPA in your lease agreement.
Okay, I don't know if anybody else has got any views on that.
Yeah,
in particular.
I completely agree with David. I think it's the 20 workers that notice is the only real element there. There was a lot of, and in the past has been a lot of fear-mongering around the CPA and what the implications could be. But I mean, really, it comes down to day-to-day. We only deal with 20 working days notice. And it's actually a really useful tool for us to use when, especially when tenants that can't or just leave a property and they haven't given appropriate notice. That actually works in our favor versus against us. So I think it's a good thing, not a bad thing. And certainly we wouldn't want to leave it out of any of our leases.
Okay, great. And please go.
There is so much crap and details that we deal with as rental agents, as landlords every day. We need to be quite good at filtering what is a critical thing to be worried about and what are important things but actually not that important. And I really want to be respectful to Bianca, but this is just an example of it is important, but there's other risks that we need to looking at first before we worry about getting too detailed in this.
Sure. Yes, you will get a recording, Mary Ann. There is a recording. You've obviously missed the beginning part of the webinar, so it will be on our website. And if you registered, you will get it through. We get that question coming through quite often. Another question, annual escalations. What annual escalations are considered normal in the Western Cape? Do you know, Michelle? I'm sure you get all the stats.
Yeah, at the moment, the Western Cape is running at 4.2%. Nationally, we're running at 4.6%. Gauteng is running at 4.7%. That's what we currently running at the moment, and the numbers are going up. So around 5%, I think, is something that we can aspire to.
Yeah, well, it's a vast improvement from even pre-COVID. Yes, do you want to say something there, David?
On the ground, if you can get away with 10%, then get away with 10%. That's where we're at the moment, and that is very recent. I know Michelle's got the figures, and because
it's an average. It's an average. Yeah.
In the main, in some areas you won't get that, but where you can, but let's see what else is in the area. But on an escalation, we are trying to get away with 10% at the moment.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Yes,
David's point is absolutely 100% spot on. So where you are in an area where you have developers that have come in and brought in a lot of rental stock into your area, and they're trying to lease up 500, 1,000 properties. I mean, I know of one landlord who bought 900 properties in a month, and he tasked his CEO with leasing up 300 properties per month in an area. That is going to have an impact on all the other landlords within that area. So it depends very much on what is going on in your area. It also depends on whether your rental is market relatable at the moment. So a lot of agents and landlords kept their rental increases low because they wanted to hold on to quality tenants when times were tough, and that was the right thing to do at that point. Now you can get your rental more market related. You can go to your 10%. But if you're market related at the moment, then you may not get your full 10%. So it depends on what you're at the moment, whether you're market related, and who else is in your area and what they're doing.
I think that's good advice. So, Grant, what property types is getting tenanted quicker? 2 bedrooms, townhouses, unit sizes, amenities like Bright Terrace, etc. In your part of the world?
Yes, I mean, we need to speak about areas. Which area we're speaking about?
Yeah.
It differs massively. Southern suburbs,
Western Cape.
maybe house. Sea Point's not going to be a 6-bedroom house. So it's really difficult to say what it is. I think what it comes down to is what is the quality of the property like? What is the cost to the tenant? We're seeing massive demand in, for example, the Western Seaboard for these lifestyle properties, these lifestyle estates or lifestyle complexes. Because it's just something extra to add for the landlord. Although I do think that's going to be a turnaround in that sort of market over the coming years. But for the moment, those are already exciting people in the Western Cape. So again, it's really, really area specific, and I think that's just, to do with research and what's available in the market and what are the costs of those properties.
Wonderful, guys. I don't know what's happened to the time. I mean, we could actually chat about this thing a lot longer. It's just run away with us. And I want to thank you all very much. Michelle Dickens, CEO of PayProp, and David Beattie, CEO of Chorus Realty, and Grant Smee, CEO of Only Realty Property Group. So first of all, to our audience, don't disappear now, because I'm going to ask each one of you to give your final wrap, just to give your final thoughts to leave the audience with about the rental market, maybe the trends, maybe something that they can use, that they can take away and implement in their business with them. Starting with you, Michelle.
Wow. Takeaways for today would be that please, can we all have a really safe festive season? If you travel safely, come home safely, spend your money wisely, because when it comes the new year, we've got all those school fees and start of year fees and everything picking up as well. Get your rental invoices out on the 15th of December before the country shuts down and goes off on holiday. The sooner your invoices are out, people get paid their bonuses, they get paid their salaries, and they spend it all on Christmas fun cheer. So get your invoices out on the 15th of December. That would be my practical advice.
Wonderful. I think it's going to have to be the 14th, Michelle, because the 15th is now
holiday.
Public holiday. We're celebrating the Bokke. So, I mean, it's a bit crazy, isn't it? But yes, so it's on the 14th, guys. But I think great advice, great way to end off there. Grant, your final parting shots, please.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just there's been a lot of conversation around escalations, but I think if you prioritize a good quality tenant and a paying tenant over your escalations, I think that's quite important. Remembering 1 month of vacancy is 8.3% of your annual rental, which offsets entirely any sort of escalation you're going to get. So prioritize quality tenants over escalation first and foremost, and then go from there.
Awesome. David, your final thoughts?
3 quick words. Be engaged with your portfolio, be professional in managing your portfolio, and be collaborative. All of us are, sometimes it's a charity case, us being in the rental market with the low margins, work together with the suppliers on a collaborative basis, a win-win approach, and you will have a great portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you very much, our panelists, and to our audience. A big shout out to you as well. Your participation has been appreciated. We trust you've got some good knowledge from today, and it will inspire you on your property journey or enhance the one you're already on. And before we conclude, I want you to mark your calendar for our very last event of the 2023 for REI, and we actually doing the Great Student Accommodation Adventure Bus Tour, which was last time we had in June in Cape Town, was highly successful. And we co-hosting it along with other author, Rita van Rooyen. She's an expert an investor in the student accommodation. Last time round, we had only over 30 people visit to different accommodation. There is a link below. It's only 1,000 Rand a ticket. We can go visit all the different tours, look at all the digs, see what's happening. Very interesting market from a rental perspective. And interesting that all student accommodation turns into Airbnbs over this time of the year. So in December, the one week they kit it out. So it's a double whammy. You can do student accommodation for 10 months. And then for 2 months of the year, you can do Airbnb. So quite interesting. What an opportunity. Come along on the bus tour. It's on Friday, the 8th of December. Just click on the link below or just go to the REI website. So special thanks once again to our panelists, Michelle, Grant, and David. Been fantastic. Your valuable contributions. If you want to reach out to any of them, just send us an email, info@rei.co.za, or just directly or to us, and we'll put you in touch. And then I'd just like to part with our quote for everybody: an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And until we meet next week, if you're coming along on our tour, and I'd like to wish you well over the festive season. I'd like to expand on what Michelle's message may be. Have a great Christmas, a wonderful, awesome, brand new year, and you come back all revived and energized for 2024, and that we can take our businesses, our lives, and everything to the next level. So until we meet again, this is Neil Peterson of Real Estate Investor, Michelle Dickens of PayProp, Grant Smee of Only Realty, and David Beattie of Chorus Realty signing off. Goodbye, everybody. Lovely. All the best. Keep well.